Welcome to Discourse. Today we're talking about Carlton Downsized by Tawny Chasney. In Carlton Downsized, it's kind of like a paranormal mystery story where a man wakes up after being thrown from a van. He loses his memory and he must figure out why he was thrown from the van, number one, why his bike is in a wreck, and why there's a dead body attached to his bike, right? So these are all mysteries that we have to solve along with Carl. And I really like the beginning of this story because we're in the same headspace as Carl, right? We're like, what is happening? I feel like the readers are also thrown out of that van, right? Because that's how the story opens up. Like, he's tossed from the van and we're all rolling down the hill trying to figure out what's happening. And then Carl is taken to the hospital where he gets to meet a bunch of really great people. They're all very nice. They're all very helpful as well. And everybody is trying to piece together Carl's mystery, including his name. They don't even know his name's Carl at the beginning.
I know. I was reading and I was like, when are we going to know this person's name? I was like, wait, we haven't even really been introduced to him.
Yeah.
You know?
And I think that's the character's concerns as well, right? As they get to know him before he figures out who he is, they're like, are we getting to know you or are we getting to know somebody else? Yeah. So they just slap a name on him and then move on. But eventually we do get to learn his name and we slowly get to piece together who he is. So there's a lot of really interesting characters in here, and they're all very nice and genial characters that are all very helpful, which I love because I feel like in real life I can't encounter anyone that is that helpful. So I wish that if I ever get thrown from a van, I hope that everybody I meet is that helpful because, geez, Carlton really relies on them throughout the story to help him piece all this together. And there is an array of characters that I guess we can call normal people, that like the sheriff goes out and collects some information about him and helps him piece together who he is. But then we also get the twins, which have bring a paranormal aspect into the story because they can go into Carlton's mind and help him piece together some things.
Yeah, I think they're like mediums or psychics, and they just have these senses about people and can read people.
I guess what I like about this story too is that the author spends a lot of time breaking down those paranormal elements so that we can fully understand where they're coming from.
Yeah, their gifts and how it works.
And then we're also introduced to other characters because it seems like a community, right? This is really like an ensemble kind of story where everybody comes together and they're all working together.
Right. It seems like a small town. Everyone knows each other and everyone is on each other's side. They're a team.
Yeah, you really get this team vibe from everybody. Yeah. And they all have a history, right? Because every time you're introduced to a character, they're always referencing their connection to somebody else and something they did in the past. So everybody has this deep connection that Carlton is discovering about them as they're discovering things about Carl.
Right. And I think also it allows him to put his trust in these people more easily.
Yeah, he talks a couple of times about how he just trusts them, or he finds out that they're just nice people. Yeah. I think the sheriff one time gives him his wallet back and he finds money in it. He's like, oh, now I have money for soda pop. But little does he know that the sheriff put some money in his wallet. I was like, oh man, I want helpful people like that in my life, just shoving money in my wallet, just sending me on my way. Thanks.
That's so nice. I know.
But beyond all of the interesting characters, we got the mystery at the heart of this story. The mystery starts literally page 1, right?
Right.
Carl is tossed from the van and we're trying to piece all this together. And we come to find out there are some escaped inmates that, I don't want to get too much away, but there's some escaped inmates that are the antagonists of the story and doing a lot of the bad things. I guess we can give a little bit away by saying that they escaped from prison and they had kidnapped some young lady. And we have to say that because that is the reason why a lot of things happen afterwards.
Yeah, it's kind of the setup to the connection with Carlton.
And we're talking about the twins earlier, where their paranormal connection, they go into Carl and they help him figure out the mystery. That's where this paranormal mystery aspect comes together, is them using their powers to help Carl piece together this mystery of the crime essentially that happened to him, right? There's a crime that occurred and they're trying to resolve it. The FBI gets involved at one point.
Right.
And
because there's some mysterious drug that they keep finding in all these victims, and Carlton is also a victim, so he also has that drug in him. So
Yeah, that's right. There's also like this crime fiction story happening behind the paranormal aspect.
Right.
With experimental drugs going
Yeah.
on, which is weird because they pick them up from that pharmacy where they also pick up the young lady. And I get we have to talk about the criminals because they are a large part of the story, and they are so different from the other characters because they are the bad characters.
Right. I almost felt like it's like an extreme. Like there's these really good, amazing people, and then there's these really horrible people.
Yeah, and how they interact, or when they interact, it's just terrible things happen.
Yes.
And I like how the author also creates the different kinds of relationships that all the characters have. The good characters often have this interweaving backstory where they're all related in some way. They either helped each other, but the escapees also have interesting relationships as well.
I know. I feel like their dynamic is super interesting because I feel like some are maybe more bad than the others, and then there's one like who is probably innocent, right? I feel like he kind of explained a little bit of his story, and you know, all bad people want to just tell people, oh no, I was framed, or I'm innocent, you know. But I think this one character in particular, he truly was. And so ever since he's been in prison, if you're around all these bad people, you kind of get desensitized a little bit to the crimes that happen around you, I guess. But I feel like their relationships to each other, like they have like these loyalties and these, like you said, like those connections between them somehow that they formed in prison, I guess. So
yeah, I felt like they all had their own issues, which
Right.
people in prison usually have issues.
Yeah.
They all have their own issues. They're all working through them. The main bad guy, Scott, I think is his name,
right?
I felt had the more well-developed backstory. We
Right.
get to understand like he's been sexually abused in his past, and we understand where he's coming from. But I like how they all have different levels of, let's call it badness, and they all have a different, unique backstory that goes with that.
But learning a lot or looking into Scott's background and some of his memories, because it does go into his perspective quite a few times. Like some of his memories were very, like made me extremely sad because I have kids, and when you have young kids,
Yeah, you don't want to see them getting taken advantage of, right? And then when you have
Right.
kids, you have that level of empathy to see
Right.
other kids in pain, and you're just like,
Right.
I don't want to see that.
And it almost made me feel like, well, he turned out to be this bad person because he wasn't well brought up or
Yeah.
cared for or looked after when he was younger. So I can almost kind of excuse all of his horrible crimes because I was like, well, you know, there were things that made him this way, I suppose.
Yeah.
Maybe and I think he's also like schizophrenic or bipolar or something. So maybe he still would have been that way, but had he been helped by good, loving parents or grandparents or family when he was younger, they could have helped him work through that. Maybe he wouldn't have turned out to be so
bad.
crazy and so bad.
Yeah, so you get to feel bad for the main bad guy, right?
I
Like
know,
you
I kinda
understand
did.
him, and I guess that's good writing. Is you understand every character, whether they're good or bad.
Right.
I felt so bad for him, but he comes up against, I guess, Carl and the twins. I guess would be the main driving force to uncovering his backstory and how he
Right.
got there. Talking about the paranormal aspect, it's really like broken down and delved into. So when we first dive into Carl's mind with the twins, we are given a full explanation of how things work and why they work. And I think that's different than most paranormal stories because sometimes paranormal things happen and they just happen and we move on and we accept it because it's a paranormal story. But in this book, we are given a full explanation so that we are comprehending it along with Carl. And so we're on the same level of understanding that Carl has. It's often interesting because it seemed also like they had a connection with the other characters as well, like they can talk to them over a distance. So there was different like levels to their abilities, let's call it.
Yeah, and then even one of the officers, right, that was kind of watching over Carlton in his in his hospital room, I think he was like a cousin to them. So he also had some kind of newfound ability that he was working on and stuff that seemed to project the visions that Carlton was having, which I was like, oh, that's super cool. I like that.
Yeah, you see, there's so many like different like connections and interweaving connections, like relationships and paranormal activities at different levels. Like there's so much going on in the story. Man, I really want to talk about the criminal activity happening in this book because I think it's fascinating.
Yeah.
I don't think we're giving too much away because I think we start to understand what's happening in the story fairly quickly, right?
Yeah.
But the bad guys abduct this young lady and she is killed and they must get rid of her body.
Let's just say no one has any good ideas. They just, they
They're a
have
bunch of bad guys.
poor decision making, and the executions of all of their plans don't go well either.
Yeah.
They're just not good bad guys.
Oh, they're not good bad guys.
Yeah, they're not good bad guys.
I found their plan to get rid of the body interesting, right? Like they end up taping a broomstick?
It was a broken mop handle
to her head
Yeah.
to keep up the dead lady's head up and to make her look alive
Yeah.
while they dupe some guy into taking the dead body with them.
taking the blame.
Let's not say who took it,
No.
but I thought their plan was certainly fascinating. I was like, yeah, I guess that would be a plan that bad guys come up with.
Their thought process behind that. Every time I was like, what?
What is happening? Are they really going to do that?
I know. I'm like, is this what bad guys do? Think of these ridiculous plans.
Have you never been on the run from the law, Rita?
I have never been on.
Have you never had a dead body in your bed?
Never
How
had
are you
one to
gonna
get rid
rid
of.
of it?
Yeah, I guess.
They have a plan. They execute it. I thought it was pretty interesting.
Even remember they bought sandwiches. They even bought her a sandwich.
Yeah. Again,
She was
nice bad
fine.
guys. Oh, they're so thoughtful.
And he was like, to make it look like she was eating. Here's the sandwich. Now you hold it. That was pretty funny. I was like, oh my god, that's horrible. Wow.
That's great.
Yeah.
It brings some levity to a dark situation, right? Like
Yeah,
what had happened
It did make me
beforehand
laugh.
was
yeah.
like pretty dark, and this part makes you laugh, and you're like, oh my god.
I know.
I like how Carlton's character comes together slowly. He seems like a very nice character that everybody likes, and we all know that he can be trusted because...
Oh, because of good old George.
Okay.
Oh, and George is the dog.
George says, hey, this guy is good to go. So we all are kind of taking along this thread that Carl is a good guy.
A good person.
And we slowly learn that through the story. And I feel bad for Carl because he's like piecing together this story like in the hospital, essentially, right?
I know. Can you imagine that? Losing your memory and not even recognizing your own face.
Yeah.
And you're just like, I'm thankful all you guys are being nice to me, but oh my god.
Yeah, that's
what is
pretty scary.
happening? It is pretty scary.
And I like the cover because the cover shows Carl pretty exactly, right? Like,
yeah, it's like what I imagined.
yeah, I was like, who is this guy? And then you read the story and you're like, oh, that's the cover.
Yeah,
That's great.
That's him.
And I want to read this quote because it's fairly funny how his look is presented in the story. So on page 11, it starts, this guy's going to drive the nurse crazy. Good looking with just enough ugly to make him handsome. And his hair, damn. What woman couldn't get lost in that long strawberry blonde hair? With good looking with just enough ugly.
Just enough ugly.
What? So guys can be a little bit ugly. That's fine.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, especially for me. I know, some girls like pretty boys or whatever, but
Yeah.
you got to be a little scruffy, a little ugly, you know,
a
to
little
be
dirty,
handsome.
just a little bit.
Yeah. Like
Yeah.
you can't be perfect. That's weird. I
Yeah,
feel like that's super unnatural.
I see. I'm learning things from this book as well. I was like, you could be ugly and that's fine.
Yeah, we
What?
want
Nobody
ugly.
told me that in junior high.
You're like, all those years I was trying to look good. I'm sad.
So Carlton downsized. As I was reading, I kept asking myself, like, why has he been downsized? Maybe because he lost his memory, or
Yeah, that's what I thought. It was just the loss of his memory.
we come to find out that it's called Carlton downsized because the company he was working for got downsized. Being laid off is actually what sent him on this adventure, right? Because he hops on his bike, he's trying to find some peace, and then he gets wrapped up with these like escapees.
All just trying to be a friendly guy in the bar.
Yeah, and then we come to
So
find out,
sad.
right? So we were struggling with, is Carl only nice because he lost his memory, or is he really a nice guy? And luckily we find out at the end that he really is just a nice guy
Yeah,
in general.
he was just trying to be friendly, like, hey, let's just play a game of pool, and I got nowhere to be, nothing to do.
Yeah.
I'm on this newfound journey of life.
Can you imagine if Carl like really was a monster in real life?
I know.
And they're like starting to piece together like who he is, and they're like, oh god,
Oh
I'm
no.
outta here.
Oh no. That would have been so sad. Even for him, because obviously he didn't know he was a horrible person. He felt
Yeah.
like a good person. Can you imagine someone telling you you're a monster in real life?
Nobody likes you.
That'd be so sad.
But luckily, he's a nice guy, and he has insurance, so the bills are covered.
Yeah. But yeah, responsible person being worried about insurance
and coverage. Instead of trying to figure out who he is, he's like, "Do I have insurance?"